Good morning, everyone who will be watching the replay of this. Welcome to Find Your Flow. My name is Chelsea. On Facebook, my name comes up as Chelsea Shrima Sonkar, and Shrima is a name that I was given in India by my guru, Sri Shakti Narayani, and it means Lakshmi. So I'm here to share some abundance of wisdom with you this morning. Find Your Flow was a inspiration that came through my passion and love for Vedic wisdom, that there are so many different avenues. Immediately, I think about when people immediately assume that yoga is just the asana poses, and there is so much more to the world of yoga that is accessible. And it's really about finding what works for you and what really lights you up inside. So that's what I'm here to do today. Because there are no questions that came through, I've actually just got a whole bunch of information to share. So if anybody watches this and you've got any specific questions or themes that come up, shoot me a private message and I can do a separate video about this later, or I can reply to your questions there. All right, so let's dive in. We're going to start off with a short mantra to Ganesha. And we're also going to do a Nadi Shodhana breath practice, which is the balancing of the Ida Pingala channels, the moon and the sun channels of the body, and it brings us back into harmony. So we'll start this now. Om Gam Ganapate Namaha. Om Gam Ganapate Namaha. Om Gam Ganapate Namaha. Hari Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Wonderful. So the Ganesha mantra that I just chanted is about the removing of obstacles. So for those of you that watch this, you can use that for yourself. I do it before Vedic astrology readings to help remove any obstacles and blockages that arise in clients' lives, and also to help me identify faster what's going on in their chart and where it needs any shifting. So this breath practice, what we're going to do, I tend to like using my fourth finger and my thumb, and you place your thumb over your right nostril and you exhale completely, and you breathe in for about 6 counts, just in your own time, slowly. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you put the ring finger on the left nostril, and now you exhale through the right nostril for about 6 counts. And then a slight pause, and then breathing in. Slight pause, replace the thumb, release the ring finger, and release. And that's one round of Nadi Shodhana. So we're just going to do that for about a minute. And that's something that you can use on your own as well. It brings you back into balance. And we're just going to do this before we move in, just to ground the energy before we start this practice of Find Your Flow. All right, here we go. Important to note as well that while you're doing this, just listening to my voice, that you might want to blow your nose before you do this too, because you might find that you need to clear the airways. And just one more round of Nadi Shodhana or wherever you're at. And while we're doing this practice, we're just focusing on the breath. And just notice afterwards when you tune into your body, your mind, and your breath, and your spirit, how much more grounded you feel. So that's a great practice if you have a lot of vata in your body. I'm going to talk about Ayurveda this morning. So it's when you've got too much air and space in your constitution or in your body in general. So here in Australia, it's winter. I believe the winter solstice is either today or tomorrow. And it's very easy to accumulate more vata in colder temperatures. So when you think about older people who are a little bit more brittle bones and things like that, they accumulate a lot more vata at that age, whereas a baby is in a much more earth and water stage. So we call that kapha. And then you've got pitta, which is for your, teenage adolescence moving into the main stages of your life where you're taking action. We call that pitta, which is that fire energy where you're out there working and doing things before retirement, where you go into the vata stage. So Nadi Shodhana can really help ground any imbalance in the energies that you have. So this morning I'm going to go into a whole bunch of different topics around themes of yoga wisdom that you can use for yourself. And like I said, if you watch the replay on this, comment below, #replay, and let me know which areas of this particular webinar you found most useful. And if you want any more information on it, I can dive into that further with you also. So the first one that I wanted to dive into is the 8 limbs of yoga. So I actually named my business after this, 8 Limbs Living, and I just think it's the most beautiful structure to finding balance in your life. It's a lifestyle, blueprint basically. So I'm just going to pull up my desktop screen and I'm going to pull up a photo here so that you can see what I'm talking about. Hopefully it's not blurred. It is. Apologies. So you see there's a tree here, and it's the 8 limbs of yoga. And it also, funnily enough, for anybody who does asana yoga, when you go to an ashtanga yoga class, it literally means the 8 limbs of yoga. So we bring these principles into the yoga class. It can be really confusing when there's different names of different yoga classes, but we are practicing these specific principles that you can see in front of me. So the first limb of yoga, you can imagine a tree with 8 branches on it. We call the yamas. And these are like personal restraints. They're also, moral disciplines. So you can see down here, ahimsa. So it's like non-harming. So when we're doing yoga poses, we're making sure that we're not pushing ourselves too hard. Maybe you just tune into yourself and go, actually, that doesn't feel good for me right now. And that's what ahimsa is about. It's also when you're feeling kind of angry towards someone and you're doing your best to come into non-violence, because that's literally what it means. Satya, I believe it's non-stealing. Brahmacharya, moderation. Asteya, non-stealing. And aparigraha, non-attachment. So we practice these concepts in our lives to bring ourselves, our individual self, back into balance. And when we're using them in a yoga class, for example, like non-stealing might be, this is a really simple example, but maybe you want to stay in a pose for too long because you're just really enjoying it and you don't want to go to the other side because you've got an injury there. That's a stealing of time, where you really want to balance those sides of the body. Brahmacharya, moderation, could be, and I mean, sometimes this term can get misused, but I tend to find that it's related to moderation of thoughts. So when you think about when we overindulge in something, so you know how some people make jokes or memes about going to yoga classes and checking out chicks in tight Spanx and stuff like that. It's about moderating your mind and noticing what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. Obviously, when you're in a yoga class, if somebody was going to touch you inappropriately or something like that, it's about, finding that there's always a correct way to assist if you're a yoga practitioner. And there's also a way as a student of yoga, it's kind of like behavioral morals in classes and noticing what's appropriate and what's not. Yeah, and non-attachment. So it's like in life, for example, when we're too attached to something, and I'm trying to think of an example where maybe, oh, I have to um, watch my show or something like that on a Saturday morning, and everything has to be this way, or I must have two sugars in my coffee, kind of thing, or I always get that spot in the corner when I do yoga. These principles where we just kind of become more mindful of ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're going to master them in a day, but I personally found them very helpful for moving forward in my journey. When we move to the second limb of yoga, we've got the niyamas, and these are observances. So they're like positive duties for things that we can do in our life. And uh, I do know these, but sometimes I need a refresher myself. So I'm just going to pull up the 8 limbs of yoga so that we can see a clearer model of that, so that it helps everybody else too. Let's see if that tree. Hopefully that's a lot clearer. There we go. Okay, so when they're talking about the niyamas, you can see these ones here. So it really shouldn't be on the bigger tree, but yeah, we've got, so you can see here, brahmacharya from the previous ones, consciously directing your energy. Aparigraha, avoid hoarding and greediness. Asteya, non-stealing. Satya, telling the truth. And practicing non-violence is ahimsa. So when we move to the personal observances, the positive duties in our life, which is the niyamas, the second limb of yoga, we've got socha, which is cleanliness. So you think about the importance of tongue scraping in the morning to remove the toxins from your tongue, having a shower to, fresh the temple that is your body in the morning, being aware of clean food and things like that you are nourishing yourself with. Santosha is one of my favorite words. It means contentment. In our family, my husband, he's from India, and he speaks Hindi with his family and with our son. And he's taught me a bit as well so that I can use it at home. And I always use the word Santosha, that are you content? And how can we add more contentment into our day? So this is about, for example, if you're doing a meditation by the window and someone's using a jackhammer outside, it's finding that place of contentment as opposed to, sometimes we're not always in control, and finding a place of contentment. I really imagine Gandhi sitting in the middle of the, down at the beach when they were protesting against the salt. And even though the British came down there and they started hitting them with clubs, that he was just, holding his space and his energy from internally. Tapas, doing your best. So I believe there are better translations for this one, but it's about just, taking positive action and doing the best that you can. Svadhyaya, studying the self. So it's self-reflection and noticing, okay, maybe you're feeling a bit irritable, and go, oh, okay, there's a bit of unresolved anger there. Which, energy center of the body does feel activated right now? Maybe I need to do such, for example, or like, oh, I noticed that my body's feeling really tight. I think I need to do a bit of yoga. Or, for example, here in winter, it's easy to kind of stay indoors and not want to go outside, but the feeling the body wants to move when you notice there's a bit of energy there, and just getting outside and getting some sunshine. Ishvara Pranidhara is about, staying humble. So I really feel like there are better, here we go. I've seen this one before, so this one should come up. Here we go. Kindness, truthfulness, non-stealing, moderation, generosity. See, they come up with different examples. Socha, purity, contentment, austerity, self-study, and surrender. Yeah, so surrendering to a higher power. You can see there's a lot of information here. So I think I'll do another class separately and another stage where we can go deeper into each of these individual principles, because they are so incredibly helpful. So that's a brief kind of explanation of the 8 limbs of yoga. Now, the next concept that I wanted to take you guys into is the 4 Purusharthas. So it's the 4 goals of life. And I've just got a picture here to just give you a better example of what this looks like. So in our lives, you'll notice that We've got focuses and aims, and this really links to astrology really nicely as well, because you'll notice that there are four main specific houses that really do cover these aspects. So the first being the self, fourth being the home, happiness, mother as well. And then you've got partnership and relationship in the seventh house. And then you've got career and dharma in the 10th house. So this is kind of similar to that in a way. So we've got arta security as like making sure that you've got your basic needs met. So like financial, home, water, uh, things like that, wealth. And then we move to kama, which is pleasure. So it can be, pleasure in all senses when you think about, good food, relationship feelings, travel, things that you like to indulge in. So all humans like to experience each of these things. So wealth is a part of our life. I think there are different concepts out there about the idea around money, but it really is an energy. You know what I mean? That like this green paper, as crude as it sounds, currency is something that has been created by people, but wealth and abundance, when you remove the paper concept or the banks and all these things, how wealthy are we? When there's a quantum field that can provide all to us, when we sit in an elevated feeling and marry it with an intent that we can attract anything into our lives. It really kind of focuses on these concepts that wealth doesn't have to necessarily mean paper. But it can certainly give you all the things that paper can buy. Dharma is about our life's purpose. What have you incarnated here for? You have a mission, you have a duty. Every single person on the planet does. Earth is a school where we sign up for this place. It's definitely not the easiest place to be. However, we all have a mission, something about we come down to transcend consciousness and learn, because it's a place of learning for all of us. And because we are timeless beings, no space, no time, that you can come back as many times as needed, until we understand it's not really about, okay, in one lifetime we have to fit all of this stuff in. Our Dharma is about, coming to a point ahead, understanding what is our own individual purpose and how can we serve the community with our own unique skills. And moksha is liberation, is when we find that final point in our life where we have merged with the divine, essentially. So moksha is really the point where we've reached the 12th house of the zodiac. It's the ending stage. We understand who we are, that we are one connected consciousness, and there is no longer a need to reincarnate in a physical body. So I don't necessarily know what happens after that. I've heard many, many things, but I think it's probably best said that you can either go to different planets or you just merge back with the divine. But I haven't reached that point yet, so I haven't had an opportunity to touch on that and be able to share my experience in that area. But it's definitely where my focus is at in this lifetime, is that wanting to reach that point. And an interesting story that I feel like I have to share: when I did my pre and postnatal yoga teacher training back in 2019, we had a death doula come and speak to us, and I remember saying to her that I'd want to reincarnate again because I want to be able to help and serve while I'm here. And she said, "Who said that you can't help and serve on the other side?" And it really got me thinking about, there is so much more going on than we realize. We all have spirit guides, whether you are conscious of them or not, that are helping support us. And I just think that the more that we are open to learning more about this stuff, it's just such a beautiful, concepts that come through and help us understand more about, one, who we're not, and our divine essence and being, and what we truly are capable of. Because I think the human mind has no idea. It's not even a blip on the, when we think, we get up every morning, I've got my tea here, we have our shower, start the day, go to work, whatever you have to do. And this consciousness, the universe and universe and universe and the universe, that's endless, there's no ending. And what that all means. So anyways, got really deep with that one. The next one I wanted to touch on, so we've done the 8 limbs of yoga, we've done the 4 Purusharthas, the 4 goals of life. Now we're going to touch on Ayurveda, which is one of my favorite subjects because it's something that I'm working towards. I know that for a long time I have been planning on integrating Jyotish, Vedic Astrology, and Ayurveda. And for those that don't know, Ayurveda means life science. So it's been around for 5,000 to 7,000 plus years. It's a holistic health method that really helps bring the body back into balance. So if you think about if your body has too much fire in it, we use cooling methods to bring it back. I did a retreat in 2016 in India, in Kerala. I lost 4 kilos in the 2 weeks that I was there. That wasn't the intent. It was a detox program, but my anxiety completely disappeared. Uh, Toxins in the body in regards to weight loss. I was eating more food than I'd ever eaten meals wise in my life and still lost that weight. They had me on these programs where I was getting massages done every day, and this is called Panchakarma. So I was in a 2.5 week Panchakarma retreat. And to see, I had doctor's appointments every day where they would check in on me, and you stay in the resort and the doctors work in a certain section of the resort that you go and see them for these meetings. And I remember coming home on the plane and my mind was just crystal clear. I didn't have anxiety for the first time since I was like 11. And I felt like a completely different person. And when I got home, I quit my job and shifted careers towards yoga. It's just the most amazing thing. There are places all over Australia where you can do stuff like this. If you want to know more about it, send me a message because I think it is amazing. We have a doctor that we go up to Sydney to see when we've got some more intense stuff that we want to talk about. And I know people internationally that I can contact that have taught me so much about this and would love to dive more into it and qualify as a practitioner in the future. So down here, I've got an image of the circadian rhythm. So you can see, it's probably better if I start with this one. It's based on the 5 elements. So Vata is space and air, Pitta is fire and water, and Kapha is water and earth. So when you think about when you look out in the world, when you walk down the street, you'll notice that some people have a more Vata body type, which is, it's generally constituted with those kind of thinner body types. They're a little bit smaller and they're quite playful and quirky, that it's kind of like the wind where it's there, here and there. Space mind where they're just kind of like, I think we all know someone, so it's very eclectic kind of an energy. It's quite light and mobile, and you can imagine lots of runners in this energy, which kind of pulls into the Pitta, where you think about someone who's got a lot of fire energy in their body. And when I started learning about these concepts, I just want to mention that there are helpful elements of these and unhelpful elements of these. So when you notice that someone's Pitta is out of balance, there can be tendencies of over-aggression, whereas when they're in balance, they're super focused, super organized. They're the best person for leading a team. Pitta is also more of like a hot, oily kind of lava sort of a watery kind of constitution, as opposed to Kapha, which is that cooler stuff. So when you look at nutrition, when we're balancing, when you know what your constitution is, so you've seen an Ayurvedic practitioner, they'll tell you, okay, you've got Vata out of balance, you need to eat these foods. And they constitute to the 6 different types of taste as well. So there's a lot to be said about Ayurveda, how incredibly helpful it is. You can find cookbooks and things like this. I really suggest, highly recommend. And I knew that after this retreat that I did in 2016 that I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to learning this so that I could help others with it, because it's easy, it's fun, it's interesting, and it's a really great system for just kind of, once you understand it, you're just like, oh, all right, this is out of balance, I need to do this. And then you can get deeper into it where they've got surgical procedures that were around before they had, allopathic Western medicine doctors doing surgeries. And you've also got healing herbs that can help, which is what I was doing in India when I was going through my Panchakarma process. And Kapha, I don't think I gave enough information on this, that if you imagine when you go to Hawaii and you see these beautiful Hawaiian dancers who flow like the ocean, and they've got these beautiful earth water bodies. You imagine this earthy water goddess, and immediately I'm thinking of Moana and that mountain. I can't remember her name. Apologies to those that are Moana fans listening to this, but it's just the beautiful flowers, and you can really feel that energy. Pitta, immediately I think of a lot of exercising professionals, people that go to the gym, if you're going to categorize them in those areas. But you can also be bidoshic or tridoshic, so you can have all three of them, which is less common. You could have more of a Pitta constitution and a Vata subdosha. You could be more Kapha and more Pitta. And it's really interesting because when you understand both yourself and those around you, you know how to support the individual or those around you so that you can help them when you can see if they're out of balance, and also know how to bring them, light them up. So when we look at circadian rhythms, you can see that Vata time, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., Kapha time, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., Pitta time at midnight. So if you stay up after midnight and your brain kind of gets like a second wind, and like a lot of creatives that are working at that time, they like working before 2 a.m. Vata time is 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So it's a great time to get up and start meditating. I believe Dr. Joe Dispenza says around 4:30 in the morning is when melatonin levels are at the peak point for mystical experiences. So it's a great time for meditation. When you get up after 6 a.m., anytime between 6 and 10, when you feel sluggish for the rest of the day, that's what Kapha time is about. So it's time for eating, it's time for exercising, gathering energy for the day. Most people are at work by that time. And then they're really taking their action time between that 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. You're getting most of your work done. And again, 2 to 4 p.m., you can be a bit more creative, but you like to kind of slow down, have a bit of fun, communicate with others before you go home at 6 o'clock. So that gives you an idea. So when we follow these circadian rhythms, there's a great book by a guy named Mark Bunn who talks about Ancient Wisdom for Modern Health, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in that audiobook, and if you purchase the book on that, and that was an incredibly helpful book in the last 7 years of my life that really supported understanding these rhythms a lot more. And now that I'm a mum, starting to get back into rhythms as my son is nearing to the age of 2. So when you're in the early newborn mother stage, you have to really be flexible with this stuff because, meditating before 6 a.m. really isn't ideal when you've got a newborn. But you do the best that you can. So leading into that, maybe we jump straight into meditation. So that can be a part of yoga as well. There are different styles and types of meditation. I believe that I've grabbed a picture here. So I've got a couple of different images just to help with understanding. When you start meditation, I think immediately people just imagine somebody sitting there going, Om. And that's definitely not how I started. I went to the psychic fair in my hometown and I came across a group that were doing chakra healings. And I was just blown away because I didn't know anything about it at the time, and they picked up some stuff that was going on in my body that I didn't even, I knew something was going on, but they picked it up just by energy sort of healing. And once I joined this group, we were doing guided meditations. So they talk you through this visual experience. I was using CDs at the start, and it took quite some time before I was comfortable with silent meditation, where I was just sitting there and calming the mind, because I had a lot of vata and movement in my mind and wasn't yet ready to ground. So I think when people start, it's definitely great to do walking meditations. It's great to do guided meditations because they're a lot more fun and a lot more relaxing too, I find, because there is no wrong meditation. I think that's probably the best advice that I've ever received, is that any meditation, even if you come out of it feeling like, what just happened? I don't feel like I made any progress there. Anytime that you sit down to become present, even if the monkey mind is running, you are practicing that muscle and you're moving in the right direction. But I definitely think in those early stages, having guidance and support is really important, because as you move further on the path on your journey, you kind of understand it a bit more and you don't need as much reassurance on that path. So But we all need a community that we can touch base with, and I really do believe that's important. So, different types of meditations, mantra meditation, we'll talk about as well. Yeah, breathing meditations. I've got some other images here for mindfulness. I do transcendental meditations when I've got time outside of the quantum stuff that I'm doing at the moment. Kundalini yoga is different types of breath practices. Um, Zen meditations, I don't have as much experience with, but I know that Alan Watts has got a lot of stuff on that as well. Loving kindness, you can find so many different types of CDs and chakra meditations. I know Deepak Chopra does uh, different guided meditations, but also, um, yeah, I really do love the chakra meditations. I just think they're amazing because you tune into each of the energy centers and just notice, okay, the different things that are associated with the energy centers of the body. So if you think about the seven main ones, there are many more chakras in the body, but the seven main ones, we talk about the root chakra, which is down near the perineum and the anus, that it's about stability and grounding and support. Then we've got the sacral chakra or the Svadhisthana chakra. So root chakra, Muladhara, sacral chakra, Svadhisthana is about creation. It's procreation, as well. It can be sexual energy. They talk about the serpent of the Kundalini kind of rising from this area. And these can both be similar to Ayurveda, in or out of balance. Solar plexus, Manipura, which is sounds like money. It's our sunspot. It's our confidence, our willpower, our strength, our digestion. The Anahata, the heart chakra, is obviously how we open to the world and to ourselves. The throat chakra, Vishuddhi, is how we communicate and express the self. Ajna chakra, the third eye, is our inner compass. It can be psychic abilities as well, and when we can see things in meditation, images, it's our compass. It really guides our direction in life. And then the crown chakra. I've just blanked on the word for this one, but it starts with S. Svadhyaya, I think it is the thousand petal lotus, which opens up, and I saw an image of it recently where it's actually outside the head. It's not like in, but it's that portal to the divine and connects us to our higher self. So that's just some information on those. And I had one last picture down here that I wanted to share. Sound healing. So you see people with the chakra bowls, visualization meditation. Some people might stare at a flame. Mindfulness meditation, movement meditation. You can do walking, guided meditations, and mantra. So mantra, I've got one down here, is, mantra. A tool used to focus the mind, sacred utterance, a word or phrase used in a repetitive manner. So I've received a mantra from one of my gurus that I can use anytime that I need, and it brings me back to the light, anytime that you really need it, depending on the flavor of what's going on at the time. In Jyotish Vedic Astrology, when we have afflicted planets, we do these things called yagyas. And this is where Brahmins and priests will be chanting into the fire using sacred mantras. So, for example, if you had an afflicted Saturn, they would be chanting the Shani mantras to remove some of the charge, the electrical charge that planet has karmically over your life, to just create a bit more ease and support when there can be a lot of challenges and obstacles coming up. As he is the great teacher. And I know for myself personally, I'm right at the end of a Mars period. So I've been doing a lot of the day, and the god that is associated with that is the Hanuman god, the monkey god. And we do Hanuman Chalisa, which is like this 40-line verse on a Tuesday. And you can do it any day, but that's my mantra that I do constantly throughout my life. Quite common one that I think people know of is the Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayata. And you'll find that I don't have them on at the moment, but most people, they'll get their mala beads and they'll either chant one mantra to a mala, or say, for example, you're using the Shiva mantra of Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, and they'll move through all 108 beads or however many beads you have on your raksha or mala, and it helps to ground and settle the mind. So there are many different ways that you can do these things. So if anything has kind of leapt out at you that you've gone, I'm just going to take a quick sip of my tea to nourish my throat. So what else haven't we gone through? The 5 kleshas. I think this is incredibly important for a lot of people to know about. The 5 kleshas are often referred to as the 5 forms of human suffering. So avidya is ignorance. It's when we, say for example, like racism. I know ignorance can be quite a strong word, but you know, humans, we all have like, most of us, but essentially humans are born with 5 fingers, 5 toes, 10 fingers, you know what I mean? Just because we have different skin color, different gender, different preference of lifestyle, all these different things, that we ignore that the one is in the many and the many is in the one. And the importance of, starting to become aware of that, where we use that self-study, self-awareness, and coming back into noticing when we are being ignorant, or when you're just kind of like really stubborn and just going, no. And it's important to set boundaries, but noticing when we are also not really in our element. Abhinanaveshva is the will to live. So when you think about the fear of death, this is pretty huge for most people, I think. I know many people who don't like talking about death in general. They don't really talk about it at school. And I think that most of us either find out the hard way, or if you're on a spiritual path, it just kind of evolves where you start to understand that this illusion, or the Maya, that is this world, we experience the physical 3D realm through 5 senses, but what we really are these spiritual beings having a human experience. I've heard many different ways that that's explained, but essentially you understand what I mean, is that we use the breath to regulate our experience here on earth. And that's why the breath is so important, because it's about the expansion of life and the contraction of life. The contraction being the winter period, the expansion being the summer. You can see it in so many different ways. But when we die, when we shed the physical body, we're not really dying. It's a continuation of our evolution and our journey until rebirth, when we take another breath back into life and then continue on these cycles and rhythms. Asmita, I amness, also known as the ego, noticing when the ego has got a hold on you. So when you're trying to transcend a behavioral pattern or shift in a way in your life, and you notice that the ego has got a hold on you and you're really trying to shift away from it, this is what asmita is all about. So when you notice that the ego is involved, or it's really trying to keep you in a certain way of life that's not serving you anymore, or others also are noticing when others' egos are activated. And we all have an ego, and it's kind of like loving that inner child part of ourselves, as opposed to demonizing the ego, because it's a part of our experience, and when we learn to work with it, it makes it a lot easier. Raja is attachment. So I was explaining this before in the 8 limbs of yoga, that in a different sense is when we're so attached to something in our life, like I have to have this thing and I cannot survive without it. Or you think about relationships when there's a breakup and someone's like, no, you're mine. You know what I mean? Like, I will not go through a breakup, because they're so attached to their identity in that relationship, as opposed to themselves as the one. And the importance of being able to notice. I was listening to Dr. Joe say something the other day about, like, when a couple can come together and say, hey, how are you feeling, and get really deep and say, okay, I'm not happy, neither am I. How about we call this thing, because I respect you and I love you, and releasing the attachment, and how healthy that is, so that people can go on their journey and continue living their best life, and you can still support each other. Devasha is repulsion. So I know this one all too well, is when a situation in your life, I think we all do really, is so incredibly challenging that we feel the need to push it away. Just get out of my face. I'm not dealing with this. And you don't even want to look at it. So when you think about the fear of death and people go, nah, not talking about that. They don't want to talk about their health issues because they're afraid of, how they're going to process that mentally. Avoiding someone on the street, for example. When we come into balance with ourselves totally and completely, we can transcend Devasha and Raja and all these things. So I'm just thinking in my head, there are so many other areas of information that I haven't added in today that I want to go into further, that just popped into my head, but we do have a couple more that I want to take you through. Now, when we talk about asana, I think this is really important. Let me just find the picture that I've got this one. There is a difference between the types of yoga and the paths of yoga. So different types of yoga, so many people will be familiar with this. So you can see here, Hatha yoga up the top. Many people would have been to a Hatha yoga class. Most widely practiced, strengthen the mind and the body. Bikram yoga. Now this, I've spoken to many people about this, generally isn't considered on the path of yoga because it was created as hot yoga. And if somebody already has an excessive pitta dosha, or they're out of balance in their pitta, and then they go to a Bikram yoga class where the temperature has been raised and it's not really a natural environment for a human to be in temperature wise, like, yeah, it's great for a workout, but their pitta could be rising even more, and that's why some people faint in these classes and stuff like that. So I just want to add that little note there because I think that's really important. Ashtanga yoga, I was saying about the 8 limbs of yoga where we're practicing that mindfulness. It's kind of like Hatha yoga and the 8 limbs principles coming together. Oh, silly me. I didn't go through all the rest of the 8 limbs. What is wrong with me? So, yeah, we've got the yamas and the niyamas, the first 2 limbs of yoga. The third limb of yoga is asana. So that's what we're most commonly. So it's about bringing together the mind and the body and using the postures as transcendence. 4 is pranayama. So that's the breath technique. So there are many different types of pranayama that you can do. I'm going to go through breath practices as well. And like you saw at the start of this video, we did the Nadi Shodhana. Then we've got pratyahara, which is the sense withdrawal. So when you're thinking about going into meditation, you're shutting down the 5 senses and starting to come into a center point in the mind, or noticing the pause at the end of the breath. Dharana is the focused concentration part of the meditation, and dhyana is you're in meditation. So like there's moving away from the 5 senses, focusing, and then you're in meditation. And then you find samadhi, which is when you're looking at a rainbow or a sunset or a baby laughing and you're just in complete bliss and joy. That is the essence of samadhi. But when you reach enlightenment, it's a constant state of samadhi, and that's what we're all working towards. And when I talked about the 4 stages of life before, or sorry, the 4 goals of life, when you reach moksha, it's that bliss. And you really are there, and enlightenment, samadhi, when you reach this point. Breath practices, I'll just share with this one too while we're still here. So you've got ujjayi breath. When you do yoga, many people will know that they do the they also call it the ocean breath. So it really regulates and grounds the body, calms the mind. Anuloma, Viloma, Nadi Shodhana, alternate breath. There are subtle differences to these. That is what we were doing before. Shatali breath is a way of cooling the body. So we roll the tongue. That's just a really crude example, so don't necessarily copy me. I definitely think talk to a practitioner, or you can check out some YouTube videos for these ones. Kalabati, breath of fire, and it's also called the skull shine. It's the fast in and out, so it's like with the stomach. So it's, I believe what I was taught was like 21 contractions. And it's really building that energy in the body. Bastrika is the bellows breath, where they... So different properties, and if you want to learn more about these, we can go into them in a separate session. Those are the main ones that I'm aware of. I've got a couple others here, but I might leave that there. Paths of yoga. So we just talked about the different styles of yoga. So you can see Ashtanga Vinyasa is the vigorous flow. Power yoga, similar to Ashtanga, does not have a strict sequence of so Ashtanga yoga, you'll notice that there is you have to follow a specific sequence when you go through. So I've got a book in the other room that's like when you do the Chandra, the moon, specific, or the Surya Namaskar, the sun salutations that people know of. There's like Surya Namaskar 1, 2, and 3, and you follow those patterns. And I mean, you can make up your own, but it's really about like when you're following it strictly. That's Ashtanga. Kundalini yoga, root chakra, so it's about the energy of the spine. I've been to a Kundalini class before, and it was quite sensuous. It really got the energy moving, and I actually felt quite faint while I was in there because it was just a totally different energy. Fertility yoga, I tend to find like that's prenatal, postnatal yoga. For mums, and Iyengar yoga, that's Iyengar was it's a guy that was trained in yoga that has his own specific style and quite rigorous poses and practices, methodical style, proper alignment, things like that. Anusara, I'm not as familiar with, designed to open up the heart, and restorative yoga, so yin yoga when you're doing, that's not necessarily great for pregnant women because their bodies have already got that elastin energy that's relaxin, sorry, that's opening them up. And yin yoga is great when you've got really tight body and really need to open up because you hold the poses for a much longer period of time. In prenatal, we want to be strengthening the perineum, preparing for birth. So that's why it's really important if you've got an injury, if you're in a special condition, like even breastfeeding. I think it's important because if you're removing toxins from the body, that's going to affect the breast milk too. I think it's important to talk to a practitioner. But prenatal, definitely, prenatal, postnatal, that's a whole different style of yoga and support system for the body after big changes have happened. Paths of yoga, which is totally different to styles of yoga, is spiritual practices. So I had a picture here. So the 4 paths of yoga: karma yoga, the yoga of action and selfless service. So you notice like literally when you're just doing service for other people, like if you go to the soup kitchen and you're donating your time, that's karma yoga. Jnana yoga, the yoga of will and intellect, is like study when you're going into that. And I know I practice a lot of that because I study a lot of astrology and these yoga themes, and you're moving further on that path through study. You can activate all of these at any one time, but you'll tend to find that there's one that you're more kind of drawn to, and all paths lead to the same ocean. Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. So you'll find like Krishna Das is great like this when you go on YouTube and you'll just see him. I can't remember what his channel or his series is called, but it's like Path of the Heart or something like that, Devotion of the Heart, where he'll be playing the harmonium and chanting and singing mantras and things like that. So like you can imagine these big festivals where there's like spiritual music playing and everybody's just kind of dancing and getting into it. I imagine when I was in Vrindavan in India and we went to the Hare Krishna temple, and everybody's Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, and the dancing and the music, it's full of devotion. It's really beautiful. And Raja Yoga, the yoga of the last 3 steps of the Eightfold Path. So Eightfold Path being the 8 limbs of yoga, the last 3 steps: dharana, focus, concentration; dhyana, meditative absorption; and samadhi, bliss of enlightenment. That one I'm not as familiar with, but we can definitely dive into it more if people want to know more about that. And what have we got left? So I've done the Jyotish, Vedic Astrology, obviously what I'm specializing in. So you've got a birth chart here. Oh, sorry, that's Vastu. Let's cover Vastu. Vastu is like Feng Shui, but the Vedic version of it. So you can see here north, east, north, center ways of designing your house. I'm not an expert in this at all, but I do know that there are places where I can get more information on this for anybody who's interested. The birth chart I was looking for. Where are you hiding? You sneaky little birth chart. There you are. So it's not super easy to see, but so essentially a birth chart looks like this. So this is the first house, the second house, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Depending on your ascendant, you think of the 12 signs. I'm an Aries ascendant, so I've got Aries in the first house. If you're a Libra ascendant, you'll have Libra in the 7th house, and then it will be Scorpio, Sagittarius, etc., etc., etc. Follows all the way through the 12 signs, so you can overlay the energy and then understanding about what that means for you in your life. So, for example, how you're represented in the world, what you're here learning about. Your ascendant really says like what your mission is here in this particular incarnation. If, for example, mine being an Aries ascendant, Cancer is always going to be in house and home. Capricorn is always going to be in the work house, and Libra is always going to be in the partner house. So, but when you switch ascendants, like if you're a Taurus ascendant, and I think it's really important to mention that Vedic astrology, the sidereal zodiac, and Western astrology, the tropical zodiac, are different. So, Vedic astrology is based on the constellations, whereas Western astrology is set to times of the year. So every year, if you're born on the 11th of June, you're always going to be a Gemini sun sign. There's a lot of focus on the sun, whereas in Vedic astrology, we focus a lot more on the moon and the mind and the emotions and what that means for the way that you think and the way that you feel. Because the sun being how you're kind of displayed out in the world, when you miss the moon, you're really missing your internal self. So we integrate all of these things. Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and the north and the south node of Rahu and Ketu. So a lot of karmic qualities of what you've incarnated here to learn and grow with. And then we understand what's going on with your chart. And depending on how that looks, we have these different major periods that we're in. So there would normally be a little chart here called the Vimshatari, which explains what major planetary period you're in. So for me at the moment, my Mars is sitting in the 12th house in Pisces, and it rules the first house and the 8th house. So all these particular themes will be running out in my life while that Mars major period is going on. And when I move into my Rahu period, which is sitting in the 10th house in Capricorn, it will start to bring those themes out. And the lords of those houses will be activated as well. And yeah, funnily enough, 11th house, because that's also, yeah, was it? Oh no, hang on. Yep, never mind. Rahu and Ketu do have their own signs that they rule also, so you'll see that they'll have those energies. So if you want to learn more about that, head to chelseasongcar.com and book a reading, and we can dive into that more, or send me a message and you can ask some questions, and I can either do a separate video or just answer your individual question if it's a bit more personalized. And yeah, so we've covered Vastu meditation styles, breath, mudras. We've got here, you'd see that a lot of people, when they think about meditation, they do the Gyan mudra, which is like, and I'm not as familiar with this, but I have a whole book on it that I've wanted to go into. When you hold different energies, like the Yoni mudra, for example, this one here, I'll hold it when I'm focusing on my Svadhisthana, my sacral chakra, or the second energy center. Prana mudra is supposed to bring more air into your body. Prana being the life force, how we breathe, how we stay here in the physical body. You can see here it says Surya mudra. I can't see the finger placements for that, but that's on the sun. So it would be like bringing more of that sun energy into your body. And I haven't had a lot of experience with mudras, but some people I know have, when they're holding those mudras in their meditation, they're activating different channels of the body. It makes me think of Chinese medicine, where we've got different meridians. We call them nadis in Vedic wisdom, where these channels that are running through the body, and when we activate them. So when you think of acupuncture, for example, you're removing blockages from the body, but when we hold these mudras, it's essentially doing a similar thing. And mudras, and we talked about yagyas, and we talked about mantras. So I believe that's everything that I wanted to go through today. I hope this has been helpful. I have found this incredibly helpful in my life. I know before I started my yoga teacher training, I wanted to know so much more. And now there's a whole toolbox of information there that can be helpful for all. I just want to put up this picture so we've got something to look at. This is Vishnu and the cosmos. He's the the creator, or rather Brahma's being the creator, but the sustainer of the universe. And you can see the planets there and all this different stuff. So it's just this really beautiful energy and the symbolism of the higher self that is in all of us. So a big love and gratitude to anybody that's watched this #replay. I hope it's been helpful. I'd love to dive deeper into this in future episodes. And yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback. Apologies for jumping around. I can be a bit eclectic with the information that I share, but again, being the first one, I wasn't expecting it to be super in flow, even though this is about find your flow. So you can use any of these tools to help you find more of your flow. I would love to support you on your journey if you'd like to go into this deeper. And dive with me, because I really enjoy talking about this stuff and it's my passion point, and it's where I want to be growing more and more. So if it can help support you on your journey, let me know. So I'll leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace and blessings to all of you that watch this, and have a beautiful week, whenever it is that you watch this, and blessings to you. All right, I'll leave it there.